latest video where I'm doing something a bit different. I'm going to be interviewing a Pro Tools expert. He's an old friend of mine. We were in Landsrad together. You can check out his mixing and some of our performances in my Landsrad playlist. He's been active in the metal scene for many years now, and he's worked as an engineer for one of the biggest broadcasting companies in the world. He's currently 1/4 of the popular Pro Tools podcast, and he's here to give us some mixing tips. It's Neil Hester. So thank you for joining me, Neil.
Hello, thank you for asking me here. This is a rather novel ditty we got going on here. This is quite cool. Thanks for asking me.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure. It's great to have someone like you on the channel to share your extensive knowledge with my subs, really, because they won't know that we've spent many a night in a pub talking about mixing, and in particular mixing metal, and I've learned a lot. So I'm glad you're here to be able to share some of that experience with everyone.
Cool.
So before we
Thanks. Hope you haven't bigged it up too much. No, I didn't sorely disappoint everyone.
Oh yeah, we've got thousands of excited people tuning in. Before we go any further, I wanted to make clear all my subs will know me as a Cubase person, basically, and I just want to let them know it's well worth you sticking around, because we're not really going to be concentrating purely on Pro Tools. We're going to be talking about mixing in general, and if we do mention Pro Tools, a lot of the stuff we're talking about is valid of whatever DAW you're using, basically. Before we go much further, though, do you want to tell us a bit about the Pro Tools Expert website and podcast and how you got involved?
Yeah, okay. I guess first thing I'll probably say, the name is Pro Tools Expert, but that's not what we're claiming to be. It's a bit of a bold claim, isn't it? The idea behind the name really is by the power of community, and kind of the same thing you've got going on here. Hopefully together we can all become experts in our own sort of little way. So it's about sort of empowering the community, and hopefully everybody is going to become an expert together. So it's not like we're dictating to the world that we're the experts and what we say goes. Quite often we get people come in and tell us better ways of doing things. So that's first off. But yeah, the Pro Tools Expert is a blog type website where we invite people to come and join in discussion, conversation. We review stuff, hardware and software, not necessarily Pro Tools, quite a lot of plugins, so that work across any platforms. It's pretty much a pro audio place, just with Pro Tools as a sort of focus. And we run a weekly podcast where we do the same kind of thing as this and sit and chat and talk about the world and anything that's caught our eye during the week. And we do guest interviews, so very similar to what you have going here, but just with a sort of Pro Tools focus.
More alcohol as well, by the sound of the pouring that goes on in most of the episodes.
Yeah, Russ has got a bit of a liking for cider, but I try and keep on water just so I don't slur too much while I'm talking. But yeah, it's cool, and I mean the way that I got involved, actually, I mean your second half of the question, was just by following their podcast and the website and chatting. And one day they said that they needed a Windows-based person because they're all Mac heads. A lot of Pro Tools users traditionally have been Mac users, and that's what those guys are. And they said, look, we're getting a lot of questions from people using Windows machines, and we need some help. And so they've just put a thing up on their page, just a broad question to everybody saying, out of 10, score yourself on how good you are with Pro Tools on Windows. And I kind of tongue in cheek, I said 9, just as a sort of joke. But Russ got straight back to me and said, "Oh, I've seen you around. Are you interested in getting involved?" And the rest is history. So yeah, I was quite gobsmacked and quite like to get involved. So yeah, it was nice.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. They seem like a very experienced trio of guys.
Absolutely, yeah. They've all been in the industry for years. Mike, he writes for Sound on Sound magazine. He actually does the Pro Tools notes section for Sound on Sound magazine, which is cool. And he's been sort of training people in the industry for years, and he gets involved in doing productions for the BBC and etc. Russ and Eric likewise have been in the industry for years, studio workers and owners, and so yeah, it's quite humbling to be asked to join them, a small fry like me.
Yeah, congratulations. I mean, yes.
Thank you.
I think it's a testament to your knowledge that you're able to
Oh,
stand
thank
up
you.
with them and
Yeah, I
and
don't know.
hold your ground. So
It's a bizarre cauldron of knowledge that's just been scraped around from random experiences. So.
like most of the internet, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would lead me on, really. As you said, they all work in the industry, and they're all very good with Pro Tools. And the reason that is because almost all professionals tend to use Pro Tools. And I think for anyone listening to this who's got Cubase and maybe wants to move on to something else or is looking to upgrade, I think if they're looking to especially get into it professionally, they're probably worthwhile thinking about moving over to Pro Tools. And why do you think that is? What is it about Pro Tools that makes it the choice of the professional?
I think mostly these days really is a historical thing. Way back when, before anybody was doing music on computers, you'd probably be using a tape machine. And Pro Tools was well, not the first, but one of the first next thing after tape machines, really, the first digital recording, and probably more prominently digital editing. Back in the days of tape machine, you were cutting and splicing bits of tape with a Stanley knife, a razor blade, and sticking them together and hoping you got your edit in the right place. And so it basically brought editing to the computer world. And way back then, it was probably 90s-ish, and computers were pretty weak as far as power goes. So DigiDesign, as they were named then, created a system where instead of trying to use the computer's processor to do things because they just weren't fast enough to do that, they made DSP cards. So it's a bit like a UAD card or a power core or whatever, but the DSP cards went in a slot in your computer and they ran the audio streams through the DSP card. So you'd have an interface like a breakout box and a DSP card inside that ran the processing, and then another DSP card that had a SCSI hard drive attached to it. So it was almost like a computer within a computer, and all the processing went through that, and it was quite a complex thing. But basically, the DSP chips were faster than the computer processors. So they got in there early with this kind of big, powerful way of doing things, and it was before your normal native processor could handle that sort of thing. And back in those days, it was 8 tracks of audio if you were lucky.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing was that they could guarantee you performance because they'd made the hardware, and it was the hardware processing. They could guarantee you that if you put it in a computer that they told you to buy and set it up how they told you to set it up, they would guarantee you 8 tracks of audio. That's a real key thing for professional studios. They want guarantees. They can't work by, if you kind of have a bit of a play, you might get a few tracks out of it. They needed guarantees because they got guarantees from their tape machines. They knew they had 8 tracks on their tape machine.
Yeah.
So in order for them to take it over, they needed guarantees. So I think by being early into the industry with a powerful solution, and by being able to guarantee performance, probably what set them on a good path.
I hear that Pro Tools, though, have recently moved away from the hardware side of things. Is that because computers are now powerful enough to just run it all themselves?
Yeah, in a way, yes. I think the market has kind of dictated that computer power is way fast enough these days to perform the bulk of any operation that you want to do in recording and editing. There's a new system out called HDX, which is still a DSP card with dedicated inputs and outputs on a breakout box as such. And the key marketing there is, as it has been with the more recent DSP powered stuff, like HD TDM, and before that the mixed TDM systems, not just ultra low latency, but like ultra low latency, like real time. I mean, you're talking fractions of a second, like much lower than you get out of even the best performing native sound card. It's even less than that. So there's now these days they've done their own card called HD Native, which is a bit of a strange thing to get your head around, but it's not a DSP card in the sense of having plug-in DSP power, but it's just ultra low latency. So it's the ultra low latency chunk of a HDX card. They've made an HD Native card. And again, it's about sort of guarantees of performance. And then there's HDX, which is the ultra low latency with DSP on board to power plugins. Basically, one of those cards is about 3 times the power of one of the previous generation HD XL cards.
Wow. And
so yeah, pretty powerful, but it's just whether you need it or not. And that's what it's always been with Pro Tools HD and TDM stuff. If you need it, you'll know why you need it. You don't need to buy it just because you think that that's the best thing to buy. Like you wouldn't buy a Formula One car if you're going down the shops, you know. It's
exactly. And then I mean, for me and for many people, Cubase is perfectly adequate for the home recording sort of hobby.
Yeah.
It's when you have the budget and the need to go that extra mile that I think it becomes more important.
Yeah,
but
I think
we're not
that's
saying by any means that Cubase is not worth having. I mean, it's perfectly good for the home recording.
I think that's it. Like people, I don't know, get caught up in the marketing hype or whatever and think that there's always something better. And it's not always the case. I mean, of course, there are better things to anything to a certain extent, but you've got to gauge it on what works for you. So I wouldn't trash one thing or another just because some guy said it's better. It's what's better for you and what you need. It's a difficult one. There's no hard and fast rules, but I do think that's why Pro Tools has been kind of unlocked to native sound cards now, in the sense that there are enough decent quality sound cards out there with high enough performance to allow them to do that. And maybe it's even to tap in on some of the Cubase market that, you know, the usual Cubase purchasers or Sonar or Reaper or whatever other kind of DAW you might be using. So it's just, I think, to try and base themselves on the same kind of level there. So
yeah, it's interesting how popular Reaper is actually. It seems to be the cheap. I think I'm right in saying it's the cheapest one out there, and
I think so.
It's very popular because of it.
Yeah, and as well, it's they seem to have a very quick bunch of developers that I think they put out updates like weekly, bug fixes or new features or whatever. So it's almost like the kind of Linux open source community where they're just hammering in it all the time, constantly developing and releasing. As soon as the tiniest little thing comes out, they'll release an update. Whereas people like Steinberg or Avid, you know, wait a few months and then chuck it out in one go and go, look what we've done. Whereas I think the Reaper guys just trickle it out constantly. So different way of thinking, but yeah, it's seems popular and cheap. I think you can get a trial version for a long period of time for you to decide whether you want it or not. And so yeah, good stuff.
They do some free plugins as well, actually. That you can download. They're not bad. You can. They're not the best, but they work very well. I get a very good bass distortion sound out of it, which I did a whole tutorial on, as I was so impressed.
Cool.
So
there's free stuff that's out there these days. It's insane. Like when I first started, there was nothing free, nothing at all. And these days, to be honest, you don't really need to buy much at all for the amount of stuff that's out there. So yeah, it's insane, which is great. I mean, also it's encouraging people to do things like software development, get involved, because there's things like the Steinberg software developer kits. You can write your own VST plugins. It's getting people involved, and that can only be a good thing. Sometimes you have to sort the wheat from the chaff and find the good stuff, but it's out there, so it's cool.
Yeah, it's a good time to be involved.
Yeah.